How's everyone doing? Today I want to take a little bit of time to just briefly talk about ethical research in sport. Now, I know many of you believe that, okay, I'm going to head into the workplace and I'm not necessarily going to be involved in research, so a lot of this doesn't really apply to me, Mark, and that's fair. But what I would simply say is a couple different things. One, for example, the constrained financial climate in which sport is operating in right now. One of the big things, especially if you're involved in high school athletics, college athletics, maybe even to some extent some professional athletics, but maybe not as much, is the idea of getting some grant monies, a way of supplementing the programs or the ability to afford programs and develop services and products for people. Oftentimes, a premium is now being paid on the ability to secure grant funds. And if that is indeed the case, then, which it appears to be, then a basic understanding of research is going to be very important for those practitioners. Because if you think about those practitioners that have an ability to synthesize some of these kind of academic concepts regarding research, then it kind of puts them a bit of a leg up on some of the competition regarding how to secure those funds. Well, part of that whole process is looking at the ethics of evaluation. Evaluation is something you're going to have to do as you put together a grant proposal, which is simply saying, this is what we are going to accomplish. In utilizing this data, this is how we were able to, or were not able to, accomplish our goals. And so you have to, be it surveying people, be it looking at archival data, be it sitting down and talking to people through focus groups or interviews, that idea of evaluation, it is research. Well, being that we're involved in sport, the vast majority of the subjects, quote unquote, that we're going to be dealing with are people. And people are wonderful, and they're horrible, and they're all these different things in between, but nonetheless, they're complicated. And we also wanted to adhere to the basic, teleologies and deontologies are talking about maximizing the welfare of humanity. Alright, well, we're not necessarily maximizing the welfare of humanity here, but we want to maximize what it is that we're providing our discipline. And one way of doing that is to just a simple recognition that we're dealing with people, and we need to make sure that we take into consideration people's feelings, people's reactions, and whether that is right or wrong. The Institutional Review Board for the Protection of Human Subjects, IRB, is basically a board that's set up on university and college campuses that overviews research involving humans. Now, not every research project has to go to IRB board. In fact, if you're in athletics, at least the way it is here at Wichita State, athletics is exempt from IRB board approval. Okay, that's not going to be the same for every university. And if you're involved in scholastic athletics, most large school districts have a person or a board where you have to submit research projects, things like this, just to make sure that A, the people that are involved have informed consent and they know exactly what they're getting into, and B, you're going to be demonstrating to everyone, or at least you just simply say, look, I don't want to hurt anyone. This is what I'm talking about. These are the measures that I'm going through to make sure that everything is right, well, and good. There are many different categories of research or different ways of thinking about research, and I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because I tend to cover this mostly in the sport and society class, and you talk about in other classes as well. But these different categories of research you can see listed there. It's just different dichotomies, ways of breaking down an understanding of the research process. One of the things that no matter what we're talking about, we're dealing with social research, so we're dealing with the scientific method. And so if you look at Wallace's wheel of science, basically what we see is just how all this stuff fits together. For us, we're going to be looking, the observations, the evaluation. Now your hypothesis and your theory, these are the things that generate your research questions. Okay? And so let's say you have a survey. These two things are going to influence your survey questions, what types of questions you're going to ask. You're going to get that information back, and you're going to draw some basic conclusions. That's all we're talking about here. Some of these dichotomies of research, pure and applied, Pure is exactly what it looks like there. You can read the definition, same as with applied. The thing that I find very exciting about sport is that oftentimes the research that we're going to be involved with is going to be dealing with both of these. We're going to kind of amalgamate them together, and while we're trying to further the knowledge base in a particular area, we're also trying to glean something from that might apply to our organizations. Oftentimes a customer satisfaction survey, that's a great example of a synthesis of a pure and applied research. The word research is kind of interesting. Just break it down. Search, and then the prefix re, which means again, so it's this sort of circular process. Again, another way of thinking about categorical differences between different types of research. Primary is that you're actually going out and talking to people. You're surveying them, you're putting them in focus groups, interviewing them. Or you can look at secondary data. And let's say you look at NCAA graduation rates. That's a great example of secondary data. It's good, useful stuff, and just because you didn't generate doesn't mean that it's better or worse. It's just a different type of information. And obviously, the more you can synthesize primary and secondary research, the stronger your argument is going to be. Qualitative and quantitative. Quantitative, kind of looking at quantities, so it's going to involve more counting, numbers, statistics, that kind of thing. Qualitative tend to be more quality-oriented things, so you're going to learn more about why people do things. You get to know them on a much more individualistic level. It's going to be sitting down talking with people. One is not necessarily better or worse than the other. They are just essentially different ways of gathering information. And truth be told, if you can, both. Because both, we like the pie charts and the bar charts. It has a sense of scientific legitimacy. But then the qualitative will give us those kind of testimonials, if you will, that you can put on a website, or that you can utilize those quotes during a presentation to really humanize whatever that bar chart or pie chart is actually saying. When you're dealing with sport studies, sport management kind of part of that. Sport management comes out of education or social science. It also comes out of business, and when you're dealing with any of those disciplines, you're dealing with people. And so the idea is that to do no harm, and this is just an example from sociology where the Tuskegee Institute, basically what they were doing is they were giving people venereal diseases, STDs, syphilis, and as these people came in, they were supposed to be giving them medicine, and some people they gave them vaccines or medicine, others they gave placebos because they wanted to see the effects, the damaging effects of the particular disease. And so, that's obviously something we don't necessarily deal with. Maybe exercise science deals with a little bit more in terms of VO2 max and chemicals and things like that. But it still provides a nice philosophical dilemma-based point. How do we make sure that we're not doing, the people that have taken the time to give us this information, how do we make sure that we're not doing harm to them? One of the things that, having worked with police officers in the past, it's amazing how what appears to be a fairly innocuous question on a survey really makes people think about things that have occurred to them in their life. And if you're dealing with that, and you're dealing with a population that's suffered a lot of severe trauma, one little basic question can have set the stage for a lot of emotional reactions, post-traumatic stress, all those different types of things. So when you're dealing with people, you need to make sure that we as social scientists, as sport management practitioners, as people that are looking at the world around us and trying to understand it more, we just simply need to make sure that we're being ethical regarding how we not only gather the information, but also how we disseminate the results. Codes of conduct or codes of ethics are going to be standard in every discipline, in every industry. We in sport management, obviously we'll talk a little bit about that later in the semester when we talk about codes of conduct, but we have one here as well. And so I just wanted to, this is a brief, short little lecture because I just wanted you to start thinking about all of the variety of issues that are important to sport studies, and not just from a sport marketing point of view or anything like that, but when you're trying to gather information from people, realizing that you are dealing with people, and kind of the whole deontological golden rule idea is, how do you want to be treated if you're going to be dealing with, if you're eventually going to be a subject for someone's research. The conduct of sports science research is replete with many ethical issues, such as bias in research, conflicts of interest, intellectual property rights, and unjustified risk to human participants. I also have another presentation that's going to be required, and it's through the graduate school here at Wichita State University, and it's actually over in the other folder, and there'll be a small little presentation. You'll have a little pass-fail quiz that you'll take at the end of it, and this is mandatory. This is something that is set forth in the new graduate school policy here at Wichita State University. So as you click on the information in the class content, you'll see this other section. Please make sure that you look at that, and we will address kind of in particular this whole idea of conflict of interest, intellectual property rights, dissemination of information, that type of thing. If you have any questions, feel free to get in contact with me, and we'll talk more about it.